Happy New Month, dear viewers of High Television. You're on to the program Nature's Corner, which goes on the air of High Television every Thursdays as from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. And today we are looking at something new. Of course, it is a new month for us to, of course, jot down some of the things we've achieved so far because we are slowly coming to the end of the year. At the same time, it is another month for us to check how safe we are or how safe we can be within the surroundings and environment that we find ourselves. And that is why Nature's Corner come to your airwaves every Thursdays as from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. to ensure that we educate you and sensitize you as to how you can keep safe when all of this is going on, or as to how you can keep safe to build an environmental conscious population. Today we are looking at something intriguing, something interesting. We're looking at development vis-a-vis environmental protection, how to achieve development at the same time manage our environmental resources. My name is Jabi Kitty and I shall be piloting this show right from now 3 p.m. right up to about 4 p.m. But just before we dive on straight into a focal point for today, let's take on a jingle break, and when we come back, I properly introduce to you our guest, and of course we unveil a topic of conversation as well. You're just in time to follow the show, ladies and gentlemen. As I said earlier, you're on to the program Nature's Corner on High Television, which comes up every 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. on High Television. And of course, we are beaming live from the corridors of Buea right about now, from the foot of Mount Cameroon. And today we are looking at environmental protection vis-a-vis developmental endeavors. And our topic for today is developmental endeavors versus nature protection, how to strike a balance. In the simple words, or how to simply put it, development refers to change, the positive change or most positive change that we face in society. It could be the industrialization, the increase of infrastructures. It could be it could mean any positive change within society. It could even mean politically. At the same time, we want to ask how these developmental endeavors are shaping the environmental sphere and how we can strike a balance between both sectors. And of course, I'm just a journalist to pass across the message to build a bridge between some experts who shall be talking to you this afternoon. And I have with me two gentlemen right here in the studio. I'll start first with my right. I'll start first with the right. And I have here with me in the studio a seasoned journalist who has years of experience in environmental conservation. He is the founder of Voice of Nature and equally the publisher of Voice of Nature magazine. He goes by name Mr. Dimo Sancho. Good afternoon, Mr. Dimo.
Good afternoon, Kate. It's nice to be here. And it's a good feeling to be back home. This has been my home from my early career in the field of journalism and mass communication.
Wow.
And I've also been here as a panelist on different programs, and this should be my first time to come here on an environmental program, so it's a great delight to be here.
Indeed, it's a great delight to be here, and of course it's equally a great delight that we have an environmental program that focuses on building an environmental conscious population to fight for nature protection and preservation. I move over now to my left as I have another seasoned environmentalist beside me. He goes by name Mr. Yamba Jose. He is the founder of Better Earth International, an NGO that focuses on environmental conservation, and he has equally gathered years of expertise in environmental issues, working with other renowned NGOs such as LookMEF Cameroon, Green Cameroon, and a host of other institutions. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Yamba.
Good afternoon, Kati. Good afternoon to televiewers. It's quite, I would say it's very welcoming to be here. It's very interesting to have my brother, who of course has a lot of experience as far as environment is concerned. I think this is the kind of platforms we need. So of course, raise awareness on the need to protect our environment in as much as we're trying to bring development into our nation.
Yes, of course, we need to protect the environment in as much as we're trying to bring development into our nation. But first, let's get a grasp of what development is all about and some of the developmental facets we're talking about today on the show. And I'll be throwing this question now to Mr. Dimo Sancho. Maybe you can briefly elaborate to the viewers who are watching us right now what development entails and some of the facets we're talking about today.
Yeah, development, simply put, is about improving on a situation, and this cut across different domains. It could be in terms of infrastructure, it could be in terms of human welfare, because you have human development, you have infrastructural development, you have mental development, and you have different aspects of development. So the first thing that comes to my mind about development is about change, which means that a movement from a particular stage to a better stage. And if we are talking in the line of development in a general scope, we mostly think about infrastructural development or socio-economic development, where we start talking about the construction of roads, we start talking about the building of dams, bridges, construction of houses, and so on and so forth. So that is, in a strict sense, what many of us think when we first of all hear the word development. We start talking about potable water, we start talking about schools, hospitals, we start talking about electrification, and these are all the different things that come to mind when you hear a community get up and start crying foul about underdevelopment. It simply means that these infrastructures are not in place, and I think that our program today is certainly looking at development from this perspective, which I think is very much in course, because development and environmental protection, they are all very important to us. They all have great benefits, but then we have to trade one for the other at a particular point in time, but also understanding that we also have to live, and understanding that the environment has a better role to play to our existence. And so, in as much as we look towards ensuring that we develop ourselves, our infrastructures to better live well, we have to do it in a way that we don't jeopardize the environment that we have to depend on to be able to live better lives.
Okay, as Wiley said, we cry due to underdevelopment, and even when the development comes in itself, we could still have reasons to cry. And some of these reasons, I'm sure Mr. Yamba will highlight to us this afternoon rather. Mr. Yamba, you told me behind the scenes that you have a master's in environment and nature protection, and I'm sure doing your studies and research, you must have come across some of these developmental issues that affect the environment. But let's look at it first globally. Some of the things, the developmental endeavors we engage in that affect nature or sustainability.
Thanks, Kati. Of course, Mr. Dimbo has spoken a lot about development. Of course, when God created man, he said in his word that go into the world and multiply, and man has been using that in its multiplication. And today we talk about increase in population. Today we're looking at the consequences of this increased population on the natural resources, because when we were in school back in the days, they used to tell us that man's wants are very much unlimited, but the means to satisfy these wants are quite limited. It tells you that our natural resources are the way they are, but then you discover that because of the increase in population, there is a lot of pressure being exerted on the natural resources. And so today we are looking at the depletion of these natural resources because of the increase in population. And these resources are depleting because man is trying to live, man is trying to survive. And in the course of trying to survive, they tend to exert a lot of pressure on these natural resources. They tend to get depleted, and of course that is why we hear today about resource extinction. Because some of these resources that man depend on, they are of course near extinction, or if not being extinct. That is why I think this platform is very much important to, of course, raise awareness on the importance of these resources that we, of course, depend on. Like Mr. Ndimbu said, of course, these resources are the things that we depend on for daily survival. And once these resources are not being managed sustainably, then you start hearing of the population crying, because at one point in time they may need the road infrastructures, at one point in time they may need the schools, at one point in time they may need water, but because in the course of constructing houses, you know, they tend to destroy some of the water resources that are available, and at one point in time discover that people start crying that in the communities where they come, they don't have enough water. These are some of the things that man needs to manage sustainably in order not to be affected in the long run, because man was trying to get a means to survive.
Okay, but at least can we highlight some of those areas where we feel like, okay, this development in these areas are seriously hampering nature protection? I hear of things like industrialization, I hear of things like population increase and all of that.
Yes, like I said before, you understand that man depends on resource, like I said before. And so there is a tendency of people needing to destroy the forest to build houses. Of course, like you will find it in Buea, people are going into the forested lands because people will tell you there are no lands in Buea to build, you know. And so people tend to get into those forested areas to, of course, build houses. And so in the course of doing this, they cut down the trees. And so the forest resources are no longer there because man is taking away the trees to build houses. And you understand the importance of trees to man, because forests act as a carbon sink, you know, to trap the sun rays and reduce climate change. But today, because of the depleting forest resources, people are cutting down trees. At the end of the day, the land becomes bare. And the work of the forest that traps the carbon dioxide is no longer there. At the end of the day, discover that people start crying, there's climate change.
The sun is too hot.
The sun is too hot because man was trying to survive. You know, and so at the end of the day, could not have that balance between the environment being protected and
developmental actions. Indeed, it is getting hotter and hotter in Buea. Just from UB Junction to Malingo, I was sweating like someone was burning goat meat. Now, let me get to you, Mr. Sancho. You've gathered years of entering into fields and communities, you the voice of nature, and I'm sure in all of this period you must have noticed some things within our communities that go against or that clashes with nature protection.
Yeah, just to try to make some clarifications here. Communities, local communities really have very little contribution to natural resource depletion. Because first, they don't really have those sophisticated weapons to contribute to the depletion of natural resources in a large scale. It's true that they tend to convert forests into farmland for agricultural expansion because they are in search of arable land, which some of the time is not to the extent they desire. Like my brother, Mr. Ayamba, has said, Mr. Yamba, not Ayamba, has said, population expansion is at an alarming rate, and when there is population expansion, there is definitely going to be the need to search for resources, clothing, food, and of course, some of the forest resources need to be sold so that they can be able to meet household needs. And if you look at the situation of, let's not even go far. If you look at the Limbe Botanical Garden,
yes,
the surface area of the Limbe Botanical Garden, I cannot really remember, but I know that it has lost more than about half of the original size from the colonial area when the Germans came here and decided to establish this as a ground where they could be able to nurse and conserve seed species for regeneration. It has reduced drastically. Look at the mangroves just down here in Tico. The size of the mangrove has also reduced very drastically. And so when you start talking about the effect of development on the environment, we don't need to look far. Around us, look at the construction pattern. Go to the My 18 water catchment. You see that the water catchment is sharing very close boundary with houses, about 1 meter apart. In fact, some houses, they actually build their foundation, but beginning from the from the catchment going up. That is already an encroachment into the water catchment. And just to make you know that water catchment and watersheds, they form part of the wetlands. And Cameroon is a signatory of the Ramsar Convention that protects wetlands since 1971 and 1972, which they have been able to review and renew, I think, about 2 or 3 times. And so if Cameroon has signed and ratified this kind of convention, it means that it is ready to respect the terms of this treaty, which conserves wetlands. But the conservation of these wetlands and its protection leaves so much to be desired. Go to Douala, go to a community like Bonamoussade, especially Denver. Denver is a wetland area. Under normal circumstances, following the Cameroon law, this is a common property resource. And it's an area where you have fishes, you have other marine resources that people are supposed to go and harvest in a sustainable manner to live on. But these areas have all been reclaimed. Douala, you still have Bojongo. The Bojongo neighborhood is another area that has come under the sledgehammer of development. And all of us are here to see the consequences. Here we see how people are constructing on waterways. You see how people are constructing.
Mr. Sancho, just before we get to those consequences, you mentioned that the community does not contribute that much to these developmental endeavors that go against nature protection. But don't we have to raise an eyebrow? For instance, you mentioned the mangroves, the wetlands. The community members are the one destroying the mangroves to go about their business or to gain income or to build infrastructures. The trees that are being destroyed within the community are being destroyed by community members who want to either build infrastructures or extend their farmlands. And if you equally want to look about plastic pollution, of how it is true that several companies are coming up which the population cannot account for that, but when it comes to the disposal, they are the ones disposing.
Yes, this was a relative statement. It was a relative statement. In the local communities, the best they can do is set fire to be able to expand the agricultural land, which some of the time they cannot control the fire and it goes out of hand and causes a lot of destruction. That is a negative consequence on nature. But when we want to compare it with those who come in with sophisticated weapons, the Cameroon government in 2020 gave logging concession at the Ibu forest to a company to imagine the consequence of that logging vis-a-vis a farmer who is trying to extend into the forest. All of these are not good at all, but I was talking in terms of relativity. Okay. And when you look at mangroves, the rate at which mangroves are depleted, this is especially in peri-urban and urban areas. These are people that have migrated and come to this area and they have no source of livelihood. And this therefore causes them to tend to depend on the mangrove as a source of livelihood. And because of this, they tend not to exploit it in a wanton proportion. And that is why you have this outcry from us, the non-profit organizations, the environmental non-profit organizations. In terms of plastic depletion, this issue of plastic waste and pollution is mostly a situation of the urban area. I mean, I grew up in a village, and it was like a culture for us to sort our waste. And we know that when you're peeling groundnut or maize, it ends up in the farm from compost. And you hardly really see us. So I grew up with that culture of managing waste. So when people now come to town, first, they don't have a farm. Even if they have to practice this culture, there will be no place for them to dispose of this biodegradable waste. And they find themselves just throwing it anyhow, which becomes a problem in our towns.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Sancho. Let me get back to you, Mr. Yamba. Mr. Sancho just mentioned that community members, that there's relativity in the accounts for these developmental endeavors. Community members have to share. Which other persons can you put into light that engage so much into these developmental endeavors that hamper nature?
Yes, I just want to cue in from where my brother Sandimbo talked about the relativity in terms of who has greater impact in in the contribution of a loss of biodiversity. Of course, you cannot compare what man does with the hands and what man does with machines. You know, I actually understood when he talked about the community persons actually are not contributing much. But of course, you will also understand that the little hole you put on the blanket of the ozone layer grows to become that big. And so the little effort that the community persons are contributing in depleting the resources in the long run gets a very big portion of the effect. Of course, I want to say here that what we must take into consideration is the fact that there are companies that actually are in the communities for their own commercial activities.
Sure.
This is very clear. You know, I want to take a very clear case of, without doing any publicity, where a company gets into the community. You know, the Ministry of Environment says you must have the yardstick in which you are going to control the waste you produce. And so they develop a very big document and sends to the ministry. And of course the ministry says, yeah, you are okay to go and do this. But then when they get into the community, you'll be shocked to understand that the effects, the marks, the traits they leave behind is worse than what they met before.
But isn't it a responsibility of the ministry to follow up and see if these people actually are following the tenets of those documents?
Of course, the Ministry of Environment has what they call the brigade. You know, the responsibility of the brigade is to do inspection quarterly in every community. You know, and so once the brigade goes out, they identify the wrongs that are being done by these industries. They of course penalize them based on the environmental law, and of course they pay these damages. But what has happened is that these effects are already being felt. It doesn't take away what has happened. You know, if for example a company gets into the community and of course takes away the tree species that are not supposed to be cut down, and then you go and pay the pay for the damages, you're not bringing back this tree species that you have taken off. You know, like you said at the beginning, Cameroon is on the red flag. It's not because Cameroonians get into the seas with their small nets and
it's used the commercial boats.
The commercial boats. You know, and when this happens, you cannot go back into the community and bring back these fishes that you have taken off from the community. So this is what we are saying, that in as much as Cameroonians have the responsibility to protect their environment, in as much as Cameroonians have the responsibility to develop their communities, they should do this in a sustainable manner, such that children who are coming after us are going to enjoy these things. The trees we enjoy today were not planted by us. You know, and so if we of this generation cut down these trees, we police environments with plastics, the children who are coming after us are going to suffer.
Okay, surely we cannot take back the fishes that have been overexploited, but at least we can prevent them from going into extinction. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're still on to the program Nature's Corner over High Television, and today we are talking about environmental actions vis-a-vis nature protection, how to strike a balance between both. And now, somebody may be watching in the house, Mr. Sancho, and wondering or tickling his imagination, what are these people even talking about? What is the use of this nature protection? What is the use of this forests, those mangroves you mentioned? What is the use of this? All of the things we are fighting for their protection. How can you answer somebody who may be having such imagination right now?
Yeah, the truth is that all of us know that we're all created by a creator. And for those of us who are Christian, we know that we're created by God. And when God created man, God created a variety of biodiversity species, from animals to plants to fauna and flora species. And the command God gave man was that man could use it as food, but to also protect it. And so the aspect of protection is where conservation comes in. And means that God was not only creating consumers, but God was also creating stewards. And so God was creating those who were going to consume resources, but also in a way that they can also be able to consume and hand it over to the next generation. And so whatever thing you are doing, anything that moves around, has a very important purpose. God created it because God knew that you will need it to live together. It's a whole ecosystem with every species within the ecosystem very significant. Take the case of the mangrove you are talking about here. The mangrove ecosystem, the mangrove trees itself is a whole carbon sink, like my brother was enumerating before. It's a whole carbon sink which helps to protect us from the ultraviolet rays and helps us to mitigate the adverse effect of climate change. We all know the negative consequences of climate change, that everybody around the world. It has become a global crisis with everybody, especially developing countries, bearing the greatest brunt of this disaster. So it serves as a carbon sink. It serves as a home to different biodiversity species. You have monkeys, you have birds, you have migratory birds and different kind of species that take refuge in this mangrove. When you come now to the roots of the mangrove, it serves as a breeding ground for other species. It serves as a breeding ground for fish species and many other species, vertebrates and invertebrate species. All together, they all live within this ecosystem. And of course, we humans, we tend to live on the fish, the snails, and other species that we can find within this particular ecosystem. I'm just taking the case of mangrove itself. If you come to the rainforest, it also has its own variety of resources that we depend on to live. I will give you a very practical example, still coming back to the wetland. The fresh water that we have comes from the wetland, and the wetland helps to regenerate groundwater that we all depend on to drink every day. And if we take upon ourselves to destroy the wetlands, we take upon ourselves to construct on the wetland, we take upon ourselves to make sure that we cut down all the trees that are found within this area to build our houses for firewood and for whatever purpose. The consequences is going to come right upon us, and it's going to be deadly. It's not even going to be deadly, but it's already deadly. Look at the case of March this year.
March 18.
March 18
in Boyatown.
In Boyatown. That was, I always make this statement and I keep saying it. When you man's tend to will his will against nature's will, the consequences is always disastrous, because nature is not a respecter of person. When nature wants to react, the consequences always leave us weeping.
Speaking
and we saw that happen in July still this year. We saw what happened in Limbe. About 5 persons lost their lives. Thousands of persons were affected as a result of landslides. Why? Because of our unsustainable activities through deforestation, our too much greed and desire to get into places that we are not even supposed to go. Before I hand over to you, I just want to give a contribution based on what he was raising here concerning infrastructural development. The government has very good policies. The Cameroon government has put in place very good policy to protect the environment.
But there's no action.
If you come to the 1996 environmental law, part 3, chapter 2 of part 3, or section 2 of part 3, it talks about, it underscores the need for environmental impact assessment. What is environmental impact assessment? It's simply carrying out studies to be able to understand the possible consequences of the environmental action you want to carry out on the environment, on the health of the people that are going to be there, on the culture of the people, on the socio-economic life of the people that are going to be within that locality that you want to carry out this developmental activity. And you will now be able to come up with possible mitigation measures that you are going to put in place to make sure that you handle these possible consequences of your developmental activity on the environment, on the culture and economic life of the people around there. But how many companies in this country usually successfully go through the entire process of doing an environmental impact assessment? And even when they do so, what mechanism is in place to follow up to see into it that they are actually operating with strict respect to what has been embedded in the report of the environmental impact assessment? Thank you.
Okay, environmental impact assessment of companies and other solutions or other things that ought to do or ought to happen. We shall be looking at them subsequently. But let's lay back on the consequences and let me get back to you, Mr. Iyamba. What happens to us human beings when we do not protect nature? What happens to us when we go ahead striving on with development, forgetting to know that we have natural resources to protect?
Let me just speak what Mr. Shantu said, that what you depend on, you can't eat your cake and have it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so the effects that we saw in Boya, in Limbe, were just the manifestations of what man was not supposed to do. And so if people are losing their lives, it is because they have trampled against the law of nature. You get? If people are being displaced, it's because they have trampled on the law. If people have their property destroyed, it's because they have trampled on the law of nature. And so, one thing is sure: once you go against nature, you can't survive. I think this morning I was reading through a newspaper and I saw news about a lady, a girl of 16 who passed away.
Yes,
and all of that.
Around my 16.
Around my 16. And people were saying, this is not true. This is some kind of witchcraft. And I said, it's because you guys don't understand the power of nature. We were in Limbe when the landslide and flood happened. And we had to join the other civil society organizations to provide humanitarian support to those affected. And you need to see how these people were lamenting, about the devastating nature of what has happened to them. And I was shocked to see a man who told me that he cannot leave this place because all his life investments are in this house. And I asked myself, this is a man who, one of the tenants died as a result of the landslide where he lives, and he's telling us that he cannot leave. This will tell you how much people don't take the aspect of nature very seriously. The second thing is that we depend on fish for protein. And the rate at which people pollute the environment with plastics, it tells you, like researchers have told us, that in 2030 we're going to have more plastic in the seas and oceans than fish. And this is fish that we depend on for protein. And people think that they can just get plastics, use them once, and then just throw them. And at the end of the day, whatever they throw in their communities,
it ends around us.
in the lakes, in the seas and oceans. And then we get to these seas and oceans to eat the plastics that we basically have deposited in the environment. The third thing is that people think that they can actually get into the forest, get what type of tree, and then use it as fuel wood. I just want to tell you how much people suffer from the effect of the smoke that comes from our kitchens. And that is why we'll be talking about the ways to mitigate these kind of actions. Because there is no way you can go against nature and you want to live a very healthy life.
Yes, and just before we get to those ways of mitigating some of these actions, let's go now on a little break so we catch our breath. But then again, we are giving you an educative break. He just mentioned that scientists have forecasted that by 2030 we may have more plastics in the waters than fishes. On today's edition of this program, we are looking at one of the aspects of development, which is plastic companies and plastic pollution, and how it is affecting us from the coastal areas to the non-coastal areas. And we have a cream of researchers and scientists who shall be speaking to us in this mini documentary done by me. And let's take on this break. When we come back, we tell you, or we discuss more on how to strike a balance between both ends. This is a typical scenery of Down Beach, Limbe on a normal day. A place where people come to enjoy the ocean view and the amazing fish cooked here. But then again, how pleasurable would your stay be here when this place is infested with marine debris? As you can see just behind me here, look at the distance between the chairs where people sit and the debris found on the ocean, just a few meters. A picture like this, a scenery like this, is one of those push factors that should encourage us to take the fight against marine debris pollution seriously.
According to the United Nations, more than 8 million tons of plastics infiltrate the oceans annually, with a prevailing quantity of other debris found at the coastline. A problem hoped to be eradicated by 2025 as indicated by Article 1 of UN Sustainable Development Goal 14. However, how feasible is this when poor waste management still haunts most countries, especially in Africa?
We have a particular problem in Cameroon and in Africa as a whole because it is very difficult for us to manage solid waste in general. We generally collect and dump.
We have to see that in Cameroon in general, we have a problem of waste management.
Environmental experts opine that there is a profound relationship between waste management and marine debris pollution.
Poor waste management can lead to marine debris and plastic pollution because for the marine debris, it does not just appear inside the water. It's either we deposit in our environment, then rain falls, it washes it through the gutters and other channels and it carries it to the water, or people that live along coastal communities, they deposit the waste along the coastline for the water to carry it away so that they should be in a clean environment. But they don't realize that the waste is brought back after some time, and waste from other areas are brought back after some time to them.
A common phenomenon is for those in non-coastal towns to be unbothered about this environmental trouble, ignorant of their role in promulgating ocean pollution, as 80% of marine litters comes from land sources.
It has a direct link because non-coastal areas like Buea, they can still cause pollution in coastal areas like Limbe. For instance, we see gutters everywhere. There is Ndongo. We don't know when Ndongo ends, and we know that majority of the earth is more of water than land. We don't know the channels that Ndongo passes through. So by the time we deposit our trash here, now there are some people that are ignorant to the fact that they even deposit in the gutters. A serious rain can now fall today. It washes the trash now and takes it to the rivers and streams. Now, when the trash has been taken to the river and the streams now become saturated with waste. So after some time now, maybe reasonable people around can do a cleanup. They still push it to another area, which that circle, the channel, through fluvial processes like erosion, the water now acts as transportation medium, which is deposited now to the ocean, which is a vast medium which cannot suffer from other traffics since it is broad. So that is the link between coastal and non-coastal areas. If we don't take care of our non-coastal areas, we cannot take care of the coastal areas, because no matter how we pick the dirt there and the trash, if we don't limit it here, it will still be affected there because the trash will still reach those areas.
What mechanisms then can be utilized to counter waste management vis-a-vis marine debris pollution?
That's why I think that it's not all about cleaning beaches, it's all about raising awareness as far as waste management is concerned.
There is a text, there's a whole lot of text, legislation, regulations on the need for those importing and those distributing to be involved in the waste management in Cameroon. About three months ago, we saw a classroom which was built out of waste plastic. In India, roads are being constructed using waste plastic, and for an economically challenged country such as ours, constructing roads using waste material will save a lot.
Now, for the level of recycling, we can look for recycling firms and know the kind of plastics that they deal with, so that at the level of collection, they just take the particular quality and deposit it to them, so that it will reduce the level of pollution.
Efforts as these requires a joint force with every country adopting and maximizing the necessary policies. because poor waste management in the country can affect another coastal country.
Longshore drifts transport plastics from different countries, from different towns, and bring them to our coasts. If you look at the configuration of Africa, you see that the Cold Benguela current flows from there, from South Africa, and it comes northwest through Angola, through Namibia, Angola, through Gabon, through Equatorial Guinea, and drains Cameroon before it tilts to the left and goes to the southern section of Latin America. So some of the waste don't actually come from Cameroon.
The ocean contributes to 5% of global GDP, hence needs to be protected. And pollution, whether in the coastline or cities, needs to be tackled because it poses a great risk to the tourism sector and the ecosystem, accompanied with several health and environmental hazards.
Marine debris pollution is a cankerworm eating deep into our society that we need to fight it deep to protect our tourism sector, protect our health and the environment at large. I trust that with you and I taking the fight, taking the bold step at the individual level, then surely we can be able to combat marine debris pollution to some extent.
Once more, welcome to the corridors of High Television, ladies and gentlemen. You're onto the program Nature's Corner, as earlier said, comes onto the airwaves of High Television every Thursday as from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. And today we are discussing to see how we can strike a balance between environmental engagement and nature protection. And I've had here two gentlemen with me who have been contributing quite much to the topic of conversation, and we have looked at some of the developmental actions that go against or that clashes with nature protection or that threatens our natural resources. And right about now, we want to look at how to maintain this balance to see how we can push forward with development, because of course we cannot stop the course of development, but at least let's ensure that as we forge ahead with development, we do as much as possible to protect our natural resources. I want to equally encourage you that you can send in your contributions. You have the number through your screen through which you can get to us. Just before I get back to this gentleman in the studio, let me take a reaction I've received here. Quite a long message. This person, Heribert, says development is good, but it comes with a price. As it is often been said, construction can't take place without destruction. But sometimes we don't always measure the both sides of the coin. How much damage will be caused if we undergo this development or construction? We don't think about that, but we just wait for the after effect of destroying our natural resources and environment. During the African resistance, it was been said it was not the French that conquered Emperor Samory Touré. During the Mandinka resistance, it was nature. During his advancing eastward, he was destroying nature when British refused him to pass through Asante Ghost Coast. The only way out, he had to retreat backwards, facing the effects of the nature and the environment and the resources he had to destroy, causing him to surrender to the French. I'm struggling yet to understand the analogy, but anyways, thank you, Heribert, for your contribution. I think you're still aligning with what my guests for today are saying, that of course we are paying the price for development, which we're looking now at how, what if we don't have to pay the price, or what if the price has to be minimal? And now it brings me back to my guest. Welcome back, Mr. Sancho and Mr. Yamba.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so now let's look at how we can strike a balance, because as we know, we have to strive for development. Because the people need development, and so we cannot stop the course of development. But how can we ensure that we continue with the developmental course at the same time sustainably manage our natural resources?
Yeah, that is a very broad question that is going to take quite a lot to analyze and arrive at the conclusion. Now, we are talking about development and conservation, and this has to take place within a certain landscape. And in this landscape, you have the investors, and you have executive directors who have established big companies, and investors who are investing in. You have workers who are depending on salaries from this company to feed on. You have these companies who are producing plastic bottles and also having their sewage that is getting to the river and polluting and destroying fishes
and water bodies.
And water bodies. And you also have large scale and industrial fishermen who are fishing a very large scale. And you also have indigenous people that are living within this environment that have been affected by the development activities. Either their culture have been destroyed because of deforestation, or they don't have sophisticated weapons to fish like those who are coming with industrial weapons to fish or to do logging. And you also have administrators that are there to look at the political perspective. And you also have conservationists that are there to ensure that these resources are protected, to ensure that the environment is protected and conserved. And so you have these different actors with different interests within a certain landscape, where one of the interests is development, another interest is conservation, another one is livelihood development, another one is cultural protection, and also livelihood protection, and so on. So there is need for a multi-stakeholder approach to ensure that there is a balance,
to bring everybody together,
to do a mapping. And once there is a multi-stakeholder mapping of a new vision within that kind of a landscape, you are going to be able to see a situation where everybody's aspiration and interest within a particular landscape is met.
To a certain extent.
Take for example, if there is that kind of a discussion where you actually have the map of Buea, and we have to actually do a mapping of this landscape to ensure that development is respected, conservation and protection of the environment is respected. Now you are going to see the environmental stakeholders that are going to say that, okay, in this part of Buea, we think there should be a green space. And the mayor is equally going to say that, no, instead of a green space, there should be maybe a landfill for the dumping of waste. And with this kind of a discussion, there is going to be a meeting point where the environmentalists or conservationists are going to have their interests respected. Indigenous persons that have lived within that area
have their own interests respected.
The companies that are there to ensure that there is development, they have their interests respected. And to conclude, not really to conclude, but to also say that this is a large scale. This is a large scale and kind of a long-term strategy that I think that if we put in place, we can be able to start talking about striking a balance between development and infrastructural development, about conservation and infrastructural development. Now, coming on a micro level, we in carrying out every endeavor must have sustainability in view. How are we contributing? How is our action contributing to destroying the environment? If you are building a house within a particular area, you have to make sure that you create a green space around your environment. It is for your own good, and it's more for your own good than for the good of nature. And striking this balance, there are areas that are actually just for nature, and nobody is supposed to trespass in this area.
Like the parks that we have.
We have protected areas. We also have wetlands. What is locally called lamba. Every wetland belongs to the government, and no person has the right to carry out any developmental project within a wetland. I mean, that is, to me, is anyway, it's on paper, because everywhere you have houses germinating here and there, and nobody is there to say anything. People rather come out to be reactive. Now, if this is planned very well, and there is this multi-stakeholder analysis and mapping of the town, respecting the environmental norms and everything, there will be no need to start going, after giving building permit, you go behind people to start destroying their houses because they constructed on waterways.
True. No. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sancho. Let me get now to you, Mr. Yamba. Given your deep knowledge of environmental protection, what are some of the ways you think we can engage in to ensure that at least there is some kind of balance on the scale between development and environment?
I will start by saying that decentralization is very good. And so there are two things that needs to happen to strike this balance. One is an inclusive dialogue. And then the second is partnership and collaboration. What do I mean by inclusive dialogue? My brother talked about bringing everybody on board. You know, one thing is very certain. If we need to bring development to a community and preserving our environment and its natural resources, then we must talk to the common man, you know. And how can the people who manage a community talk to the common man? It's through a very inclusive dialogue. True. Where you bring the women, you bring the youth, you bring the children,
the elderly.
You bring the elderly, you bring every stakeholder on board. And I started by talking about decentralization, because when the municipality takes responsibility to develop its community in a sustainable way, then the people are going to enjoy. I think in some 3 or 4 days to come, the Buea Council is going to have its budget urgent debate. Now, what are the budget heads? What aspect of the budget is allocated to environmental protection? What is the roadmap of urban development for Buea municipality? You know, what is the council talking about in terms of developing its municipality into the urban sphere? Because Buea is getting into the urban sphere. And so, what is it that the municipality envisages as their type of development? Today you find that there are a lot of houses being constructed here and there, like Mr. Shantu talked about. But then, are these houses green enough? You know, because a lot of these houses constructed, I will tell you, don't think about the green part of it. That's why he talked about you need to have some green spaces left. But then, you understand that when the councils go about creating public buildings, you know, they will tell you that they have constructed the council hall, they have constructed markets, but are these markets green enough? Because at the end of the day, these buildings will generate some amount of heat, which of course goes into the atmosphere and contributes to the global warming. But if the government can of course take into consideration some urban smart energy, you will discover that the amount of heat generated by these buildings are going to drop. That is why we talk about the renewable energy. Now, in terms of the partnership, it's true that maybe our municipalities do not have the funds to generate this kind of project and implement them. They need to go out of their shelves and look for these partners who basically can support them in these endeavors. There are a lot of them out there. Last month, or this, because we're already in November, last month in Yaoundé, we had the 2 days conference on climate change. And a lot of those funders were there. They just needed to see the idea you want to bring in that is going to reduce the effect of climate change. And that is why I was talking with the Tiko municipality this morning about, please, do you guys have the climate strategy for the municipality? You know, this is where we need to start from, because a lot of these guys, I don't blame them at one point in time, because their mandate is geared towards what have you done in 4 years. And so they don't think about the long term, the future after they go, after them. So they are looking at what can we do now, so that after 4 years or 5 years we are being elected into office. And so they think about those things that they can do them now, you know. And the fear is that if we do mostly lobbying, advocacy, and all of that, after 4 years or 5 years, they will ask them, what have you done? They will say, we have been. Say, hey, no, these guys have not done anything for the community, you know. But these are things that the common man needs to understand, that their municipalities can be developed if they basically take these kind of actions.
That they are short-term and long-term development. And of course, Mr. Sancho and Mr. Yamba have mentioned quite a couple of stakeholders, bringing everybody together, both the government, the companies, and all of that. But just before, we know that these things may take a while, just before everybody comes together, the common man who is watching us, they'll still go about their lives tomorrow. How can they get involved? What ways can they put in to ensure that as they're going about their own local developmental strategies, they still be environmental conscious?
I want to go right down to the language where the common man needs to understand. Since you talked about the common man, the first thing is that mommy, papa, pikin, that bush where you go there for go move all that stick them. Say you want to use and cook for kitchen. Make sure say as you go for that bush, you go cut them down. Try for pick one tree you plant them, because these are the regeneration endeavors that we are asking the common man to do. Because once you get into the community, say, that firewood don't dry, you might cut and down, can't go for house. What are you doing to replace? So there must be the aspect of reforestation once these trees are being taken off. The second thing is that mommy, papa, there are some people in the way no need for use them. There are people use them one time, you throw them.
They bought it in two.
They bought it in two. These are the things you need to avoid. If you go market for go buy, find back way if you carry them, use them more than once. Because when you go take back way, you go carry them for market, go house after you go take a you throw them. The next thing is that back way don't throw and so that apple they go over inside sea, it can affect you back. You know, these are the things the common man needs to do. The third thing is that mommy, papa, pikin, you are there for community. Try for manage your dirty for your compound. Because that dirty you get for your compound, try for make sure say you move the one way it concern plastic. Put on one corner. The one way na dirty for cocoa, cassava, yam, if it easily rotting. Take them, go keep them for bush. Because that one so go bring back your bush will become very fertile. Because what will happen, I say most of the times the parents tend to exploit their lands as possible because they want more use. And so as they are doing this more and more and more, the land becomes infertile. Okay. You know, so the way they can regenerate their soil, not to go and take the kind of chemicals to spoil their soil. Maybe they use that their small dirty cocoa and kanda planted for house. They can go for bush, go put them. It will help their soil to become fertile and they'll get better planting, better cocoa, chop for we for town.
Okay, since as Mr. Yamba don't carry we go for side for local plants, we want to ask and say, Mommy, you check say as you don't talk and say if you destroy, you cut all that tree, then cut and go make firewood. What if you come back in 5 years time, you know get another tree for carry and go make firewood? Now how you go do that particular time? So better cut small, you leave some or you plant some that at least if you get some. Let's talk for local plants, say chop small so you go chop forever. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us for being with me rather on the program today as we are about to bid farewell since time is beckoning against us. Any last word of action, any call for action from you, Mr. Sancho?
Yeah, one thing we have to understand is that our well-being and that of generations to come is dependent on the environment, and we have to be very intentional about taking care of the environment. It shouldn't be like an accident. It shouldn't be like we wait until there is a disaster before we start thinking that we need to take care of the environment. We need to be proactive. We need to weave this into every strategic plan at the level of the councils, at the level of village traditional councils, at the level of city councils. These have to be strategically and intentionally included in the strategic plan, in the budgeting of every municipality. That has to be taken care of. Now, coming back to the common man, that is what I always say, paying forward. Paying forward. This means that whatever thing you are doing, know that the consequences, it may not come to you, but will come to the generations. Now, what you are benefiting today is because some people left some for you.
True.
And so in your action, you should be able to know that you need to leave some.
For your children to come.
I usually, anytime I eat maybe a fruit, you see I remove the seeds and look for a place to keep. And my children ask me, are you sure you ever eat this fruit? I said, this is what I'm eating, I'm not the one who planted it. So I need to plant it. If you people grow to eat it, fine. If you don't eat it, those who are coming after should be able to eat it. And even if they don't eat it, the leaves of this tree, the branches are going to contribute to absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, which is going to contribute to fighting against climate change. The industries that are found here, the companies that are found around here, how environmentally friendly are your actions? You who is drawing a plan to go and start constructing, do you think about a green space? Do you also reflect to see that where you are constructing is not on a waterway, it's not on a wetland? Yes, it may be dry now because it is not the heart of rainy season, but be rest assured that when nature gets angry, you are going to feel it wrath, and the consequences may be deadly. In fact, will be deadly. So we have to be environmentally conscious. In fact, we don't even need to go far. Our natural resources are limited. And everything we do, from the dresses we wear to the water we drink, contribute to depleting these natural resources. When you get up in the morning and you are not using your light, put it off.
Yeah.
Because these natural resources that is contributing to this light being on. When there is no need for you to buy so many dresses and just pack and you are not even wearing them because you are in doing this promoting the cotton industry, and all of this goes back to what? To nature. Use of papers. I mean, I do a lot of recycling in my office. These are just basic things that you do. If you are not bathing, why not switch off the tap. It is not because you are in a hotel that they have paid everything and water is your fact they have paid 50,000 that you think you just open the tap and it flows. It has a consequence on natural resources. And while we are talking about development, let everything regarding the protection of the environment, striking a balance, start with me and you. And then we are going to be talking about a sustainable future, an environment where a monkey will be able to walk down the street and nobody will think of putting it in the pot. Okay. I mean, I have traveled and I see this happen in so many countries. I was in Kenya 3 weeks ago, and I mean, monkeys were just moving freely and people would just pass as if they don't exist. I hope we can get there someday, and we are really going to be happy that we got there. Because of time, I'm going to end here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sancho. Now let me get to you, Mr. Yamba. Any last words? Call for action briefly.
Call for action to three persons. First, the government. When the government of Cameroon enacted the environmental law of 1996, Cameroonian population was less than 20 million. I think there's need for the government to update that law and revise it so that it takes into consideration the present dynamics and the reality. The second thing which I will talk about is the municipalities. They need to actually get their climate strategy in place in all municipalities so that they take into consideration the protection of the environment. And then the common man, lastly, the common man, I will say here that the common man basically needs to be conscious of the fact that his or her environment is his or her home. And so if you spoil where you live, there's no other planet where you're going to have life. Thank you.
There is no other planet where we are going to have life. Surely the forest can live without us, but we cannot live without the forest. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying glued to this edition of Nature's Corner. We hope to have your company again next week, Thursday. Remember, the show or the program comes on the airwaves of High Television every Thursday as from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. where we discuss environmental issues. We're all about getting you more connected with nature and preserving the resources that we have. Thank you, Mr. Sancho and Mr. Yamba, for gracing the set today.
I should be the one thanking you because it's an opportunity for our people to understand that their environment is their home.
Okay.
Thank you also for giving us this platform to contribute towards building this planet our only home, apart from the home in view.